Hi everyone, welcome to this video. My name is Ashley and I'm one of the founders of howtodrinkwine.com. And I'm going to be doing a series of videos to help you understand our unique tasting method, the How to Drink Wine method. Now, if this is something that interests you, we have tons of materials available for our students. We have our specialized tasting grids. And what's really interesting is that we started breaking down the different grids from different certification organizations in wine to really see what we're pulling out. And one thing that we noticed was many of the things that we talk about during blind tasting have an actual scientific reason as to why those flavors are in that particular wine. So we're going to use our method that we've developed where we actually take a really deep look at structure. And I have two red wines here today. Yes, they're not blind. I know what they are. I'm going to help break them down for you though. We're going to start with our structure because we have found that structure doesn't lie when it comes to explaining exactly what variety is in the glass. And then we've pulled out really interesting either winemaking techniques or genetic markers that are found in each individual grape variety that can help pinpoint where we're going. Now, blind tasting is a true science. Everything we're going to talk about, like I said, has a rhyme and a reason and a science behind it. So let's go ahead and jump in. So the two wines that I have here today, and it's so interesting. I know you can kind of only barely see it, but I have a Chianti Classico and I have a Shiraz from Australia. These are also wines that we get from Master the World. We have our own curated kits from them, which is really, really cool. And we're going to be going through the testable varieties that are available from the Court of Master Sommeliers America. Now, the European court has more varieties, and then the advanced and master's levels of these exams have more varieties as well. But this method holds true for everything. Right. Now, what I like to say is this is almost like being in a horse race. When you pick up a glass of wine, all the horses come out the gate at the same time. But when you look at color, especially in red wines, you automatically can pull the grapes apart into different categories. Some grapes have low anthocyanins and color compounds, which means that very much like our skin, some grapes are naturally going to be lighter in color than others. And I like to use the term density because it's not the shade of the color, it's how much saturation there is of the color. While some grape varieties naturally have a higher density of color. So if you know what grapes are in the light end, what grapes are in the dark end, and what can kind of cross in the middle, then by color alone, you can kick out a ton of possibilities, even when you get more and more grape varieties added into it, which is so interesting, right? But again, we're going to just use the Certified Sommelier exam grape varieties that they give us. I believe there's 13 reds that you can choose from different places around the world. Now, one of the other things too about these varieties is they're all kind of based on classic styles from classic regions, which means like you will have variation, right? Sometimes you'll get a wine that has a ton of oak on it that you wouldn't expect because that's a winemaker choice. Or sometimes a wine is lighter than expected because it was a cooler vintage, or again, winemaking techniques can change some of that. But overall, there's a standard in these varieties. Now, again, not everything's going to fit the mold completely, but we're going to show you kind of how to find exactly what's in the glass by seeing how much of these things match up. So again, think about a horse race. All the horses come out the gate. By color alone, half of those horses are going to the back, right? Their chances of winning are not very high. And then when we go through structure, we start to see that some of those horses start taking the lead. So even if it won't take us all the way perfectly there, this is when we'll start using fruit later on or other descriptors. It'll get you most of the way there. So you'll be really confident on what you call in the glass. So let's start with the first one. So again, this here is Chianti Classico. Now, this grape variety in general tends to be in that thin-skinned camp. So is Nebbiolo, interestingly enough, as well as Pinot Noir, Gamay, Cabernet Franc can be in there too. If it's from the Loire Valley, it can look like a lighter skinned grape. Grenache is here as well because Grenache on its own, you can pretty much see and read through it. But it's when you start mixing more Syrah and Mourvedre in that you get a little difference, right? But this guy here, this is a light colored ruby with a little bit of like it's starting to turn like brick red and orange, which means it's got a little age to it. But I can see through it. I can see my hand through it. I can read through it. This is a thin-skinned grape. So automatically I know where I'm at just by that. Unfortunately, when we get to color variation, small hints of purple or small hints of garnet can help, but it doesn't always necessarily point to a specific variety. because that can be variations again with winemakers and age. So really, we're just looking at how dense is it, right? So now I know exactly where I'm going to be. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to structure. It's okay to smell it, but there's a reason why we don't start with fruit. We don't start with fruit because most fruit descriptors can be used for every single wine. I can guarantee both these wines are going to have red and black cherry. They might have cranberry, pomegranate, raspberry, strawberry, blackberry, right? Those are just general terms that we use for most red wines. So fruit is helpful later on down the line, but really we're going to start eliminating some guys just by structure. Now, each wine organization has different calls for structure. WST is different than CMS, is different from like the CSW. But once you start training in a particular line or a particular set of exams, you'll get pretty good with your structure. This right here, and again, I know this is Sangiovese, but this is medium plus acid, medium plus tannin. It's funny because they feel light in the beginning and then they get really drying later on. And it's medium plus alcohol. Now, when I judge alcohol, I actually do sip a little, right? And I let it go down my chest, go down my throat into my chest. And then I wait to see what that reaction is. Every body is different, which means that I know what my personal call is. It's when I start to feel a little bit of heat here. I can usually say this is like probably between 13.5 and 14%. That doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So the best way to start really setting your scales when it comes to understanding your structure is just knowing what's in the glass, right? Being able to look at alcohol and be like, this is what 13.5, 14%, 11% should feel to me. So I know this is probably 13.5. So because I'm in medium plus across the board in structure, I can automatically say like Nebbiolo is out. Nebbiolo is going to have higher tannins. The acid is going to be ripping. It's going to be higher than this, right? And then there's a few grapes that just don't really fit. Pinot Noir can be like this from a really good producer in Burgundy or California. But again, it's not always this high in tannin, but it can. So again, it's not ruled out completely. It's just not in the lead. And then Grenache is another one that I think about with this. And I'm like, Grenache is a little lower acid and higher alcohol. Like I expect this to be high alcohol if I'm drinking Chateauneuf du Pape. Again, it's not out, but again, certain grapes are kind of taking the lead. So from there, the next thing that we look at in the how to drink wine method is we talk about oak, right? How much oak is on this wine? And this is really important because this winemaking technique can vary, but classically, we don't expect to be smacked in the face with oak from classic Barolo or classic Sangiovese. In fact, out of the thin skin grapes, the only one that we really expect a lot of oak on is Pinot Noir. Now, here's a catch. Sometimes Rioja, Tempranillo from Spain, can look like this if it's aged, if it's like a Gran Reserva. So if you think you're somewhere in that thin skin family, but it's covered in oak and you get that coconut and that dill or however you identify American oak, you're probably in Rioja, right? So again, this is one of the key things we just look at. This is a neutral oak. I'm not getting any new oak. It's got some faint dustiness, some old wood, and like some, kind of dried out cinnamon. So it's not a lot. Unfortunately, that means that most grape varieties can fit this, right? If I had a ton of oak and was like this, and I would think we would probably be in Pinot Noir camp. So from there, we're going to move on. And the next two we're going to look for is we're going to look for pyrazines. Pyrazines is a genetic factor that is found in the Cabernet Sauvignon family, mainly. And it can be found in any grape variety, but usually in such small doses that you can't tell, right? Like our bodies, we are not able to pick it up in low doses. So if I were to get pyrazines in here in a grape that looked like this, I would think it was either a really wonky cab, like somebody messed this guy up, or it's Cabernet Franc. So what I'm looking for now is I'm looking for the intense pyrazines when we talk about green bell pepper or vegetables. But as a grape ripens, we start to see that these chemicals change. They become more like pine needles, dried mint, eucalyptus, cedar, even like green tobacco. I live in the South. For those of you that live in the South, you probably smelled a tobacco barn. Those are how pyrazines evolve in ripe wines. I'm not getting any of those in this, which means I'm going to leave Cabernet Franc out. There's no way this is Cabernet Franc now, right? There's just no pyrazines. And this is something most of the population can detect. You should be able to pick it up with practice. Here's another thing I like to tell people is like, this is like trying to listen to a symphony orchestra, right? When it's a three-piece band, you can pull out a horn and a violin. But when you're listening to a very, very complex wine, sometimes pulling out the violins can be hard. So if you don't get it right away, it's okay. It's just practice, right? So now that Cab Franc is out, the next thing I'm going to look at in here is Rotondone. And again, about 3/4 of the population can smell and taste this. If you're someone who can't, there are ways to work around it. But Rotondone is the chemical compound that creates this black pepper or spice note. And when the wines are really ripe, they almost create like smoky woodsiness, right? It gets like bonfire-y. So Grenache, Syrah, and Zinfandel tend to show Rotondone. So I'm not getting that here. I'm not getting any black pepper because I could now fully rule out Grenache because there is no Rotondone, right? Even if the structure wasn't perfect, now I know it's not going to be that. So now just here, we've ruled it down to Pinot Noir, maybe Gamay, if it's like, you know, a big, big Gamay, or Sangiovese, because now nothing else fits. The last two things we're going to look at really play into thin skin grapes, right? Or those lighter colored grapes more than anything else. And that is Brettanomyces and volatile acidity. These two things, Brettanomyces grows in soil. And so it tends to affect the wineries that these grapes are in. And then the grapes pick them up from being infected in the wineries. This is like that earthiness that people talk about in French wines, right? And it's funny, like when I'm in Burgundy and I'm in someone's cellar, I know that they have Brett because I can smell it. It permeates it. It is almost like that mushroomy, basementy thing that happens. And Brettanomyces can happen anywhere in the world, but it is a factor in French wines more than anything else. So again, nothing is perfect, but if you're getting Brett in a wine, it's probably French, unless it's like, you know, Northern Italian or some weird Spanish wine, right? And again, we've already gone through enough factors that we kind of know, right? Like I don't think that this is going to be from Spain at this point. So if there's no bread on the wine, the next thing I have my students look for is volatile acidity. This is a really cool side effect from grape varieties that have really good acid and usually uncontrolled fermentation temperatures, right? Old school fermentation methods. But it can also just happen in high acid grapes. And volatile acidity for me, it's more of a feeling, a sensation. So it's actual acids that get aromatized. So you can pick it up in your nostrils. I want you to think about if you're cooking with vinegar, right? You deglaze a pan, you throw it in, and you can feel it, right? It kind of like hits up and creates a sharpness. And some people say it smells like balsamic and tar. In fact, on the certified sommelier grids, that's volatile acidity right there. It's like that's what they're asking for. So if there's no VA on the wine, then we can reassess France because not all French wines have Brett. But for me, I get it. Like it really does. It smells like I put red wine vinegar in like a cooking pasta sauce, right? Like I get it. I can feel it. So now I am in Italy. I know I'm in Italy. If I'm getting this kind of VA, I don't have a lot of new oak like you can get in Rioja, right? I don't have any Brett that could lead me to France. And then Pinot Noir and Sangiovese can get really confused for each other. And I think that's so interesting because they both have the same fruit descriptors. They both can be, like I said, red cherry, pomegranate. They can be, you know, raspberries, strawberry notes in there. But there is something about Sangiovese again that is a little bit more herbal, and then that VA kind of comes through. So now we know where we are, but the way that our grids are written out is the rest of the grid is really similar again to all the rest of the tasting grids, but now we're just justifying. So after this, we will look at herbs in the wine. We will look at earth and mineral. We'll look at other things that could lead you into a specific direction. We'll look for carbonic just to make sure that this is not gamay and we're not going crazy, right? But pretty much just by going through our key indicators and our structure first, we're able to rule this as Sangiovese pretty easily. Now, this wine, my next wine again, this is Shiraz from Australia, and it is darker. Like I can't see through it until I like put my hand like almost on the glass, right? Like I can't read through it, I can't see through it. This is what we considered old school term is thick skin grape, while the Sangiovese was thin skinned. But we like to say high density and low density of color. And again, this is ruby, and there's even just a little bit of like that garnet showing on the rim. So these are pretty similar in color. They're just different densities. So if I'm here and I'm taking an exam, a sommelier exam, I'm going to know that there's specific grapes that show up like this, again, unless a winemaker did something wonky or it comes from a cool region, which then it probably wouldn't be testable. So this guy here, I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh, I'm in Cabernet, Merlot, or I'm in Malbec, or maybe Zin, maybe younger Tempranillo. and Shiraz. That's it. That's all I'm at the American CMS level. And if we're in WSET, we can throw a little bit more in there, right? Even Northern Rhone Syrah usually looks a little lighter, but still, we're going to keep Shiraz and Shiraz in either way. So great. We just narrowed our world in half. I love it. Now from here, we're going to go straight to structure. Again, you can give it a little sniff. And again, many of the fruit in the Sangiovese, same fruit I'd call here, interestingly enough. There's like a lot of red cherry in both. So let's go straight to structure. And it's high alcohol. Like I can feel it all the way up to the top. So great. I know it's high alcohol. Love it. Unfortunately, all of our higher density grapes can have high alcohol, right? Because usually they tend to get a lot more ripeness. But then also, while I'm thinking about this, the acid here is medium. And again, I know what this is. I know this is Shiraz, and most Shirazes are medium to medium plus acid. I also have a list of like just generalizations we can look for and kind of how grapes vary. We have a new book coming out, by the way. It's going to be a full-fledged textbook that kind of gives these like areas that we can find this in. But for me, this is medium acid. And the tannins are medium plus again, but they feel a little different, right? The wine is thicker and heavier, and so the tannins feel a little thicker and heavier. Okay, so great. All the thick skin grapes or all those high density grapes are still here. So now we're going to go on to oak. And there's a difference in American oak and French oak. There are very few wines in the world in American oak, by the way, because it does give you that rich coconut caramel butterscotch thing that happens, that really intense vanilla. So most of the wines are in French oak, and French oak to me always leads to spices. And you may have a different descriptor that leads you to French oak, so trust yourself. But for me, it feels like I'm mixing spices together to put into a pie filling. Like it feels like cinnamon, cardamom, clove, right? A little bit of like allspice or anise in there. Like it's just like dried woody spices. And this has a lot of it. This guy right here, this isn't a lot of oak. Okay, great. Out of my, heavier, those high density grapes, interestingly enough, they can all, based on the producer or the region, they can get lots or a little bit of oak. But some get more than others, right? Like if you're in California, you expect it to be a lot. Australia can be a little to a lot. Malbec can be a little to a lot. But the amount of oak in here does not lead me to France, Bordeaux, or Northern Rhone. Northern Rhone very rarely gets this much oak, right? So I can already steer a little bit away from that. But now what's really interesting is out of the grapes that I've mentioned, they are going to either have pyrazines or they're going to have rotundone. So the grapes that have pyrazines, or those green factors to them, is Cab, right? We already talked about Cab Franc, but that looks a little lighter. Merlot and Malbec. Now, Malbec doesn't have as much, so you may not be able to pick up pyrazines in Malbec. And many times they can be really faded. Like I said, it's like trying to pick out a single instrument in that orchestra, but it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means it takes practice. Now, interestingly enough, the other of the high density grapes have rotundone. Zinfandel can have it, and it feels a little lower in Zin, but it's still there. Grenache, which we know if we were looking at like, a Grenache with lots of Syrah Mourvedre, it could be this color, but very rarely. And then Shiraz or Syrah. So I'm here and I'm just going to And what's interesting is there is like a woodsy note, but it's not pyrazines. There's a difference. This is not like cedar or pine needles to me. This is like chopped firewood. And there is this little, it's so fruit forward. And I wanted to use an Australian Shiraz because they have so much, they're so fruit forward and they're intense. But there's this little hint of smoke here. And the black peppercorn that is so prominent in Northern Rhone here feels like table pepper, like if you get like the cheap stuff and you're trying to sprinkle it on and you have that like dulled sensation and that little bit of heat, that's what this is. But for me, practicing with our method for so long, I know this is rotundone because I'm actively looking for it. So I can actively say yes or no. And there's rotundone in here. Great. Yay. So now we're just going to go through the other of the two key indicators, right? And then that's going to be Brettanomyces, which Northern Rhone loves Brett. Like if you get that iodine barnyard leather, like horse poop, Brett is actually like the key thing that makes sour beer sour. So if you think sour beers are gross, you're not going to like Brett, right? And it is. It's like this really manure-y style smell. And Brett can be in low doses. It can be just like a little bit of earthiness, or it can be a fault, right? Like you don't want it. But here's the thing: is in Australia, bread is considered a fault. Like winemakers will not let any wine go out of their winery if it has Brettanomyces on it. So if you have Brett, you're in France. Ta-da. If you don't, and you think you're in that Syrah Grenache Zin family, you're in California or you're in Australia. Because again, it is a fault in Australia. They do not like it. And then from there, we're just going to check for VA. Like, I don't think we're wrong. Like, we don't think this is Tempranillo, but Tempranillo can show some volatile acidity sometimes. It makes this weird, like sweet and sour, like black vinegar or hoisin sauce note, right? It gets kind of a little again weird, sweet and sourish. And I don't get any of that. So here we are. I've narrowed this down. I know I'm probably in Zin or Shiraz, and alcohol just isn't high enough for Zin. I don't get this weird raisination and tart fruit at the same time that leads me to Zin. I would say, based on the density, the high alcohol, the oak usage, and the rotundone, there's nowhere else in the world I can be but Australian Shiraz, right? And again, I'm working in this video on a little bit narrower field of testable grapes, but that doesn't mean that this technique, like I said, doesn't work for everything. It really does. So no matter what you're doing, if you have any questions after watching this video, please send me an email to ashley@howtodrinkwine.com. Check us out on our website, howtodrinkwine.com. And when I'm going to be doing a lot more of these videos, these like cool little comparisons, because if you are sitting a CMS exam, the certified level, you get two reds, two whites, right? The cool thing about doing two next to each other is I know thin skin, thick skinned, and I can compare them. Like if I'm debating on like something like VA or Rotundone, I can go back and forth to really get a good idea and use them as kind of sounding boards against each other. So I hope you enjoyed this video. This was very fun for me. And we also, just a heads up, we run a course. It's a 10-week group course. And again, we're a private company. We're not affiliated with CMS. But this course is so amazing. I take 16 students and you study together over 10 weeks. There's 2 live sessions a week. And it goes for anyone around the world. We help you prep for any CMS or service-based exam. And it's just a really, really great time. We give you our digital version of the textbook that's about to be published. You get all of this. You get the how to drink wine grids. We have our own custom maps we've made. And not only that, you get 40 hours of live instruction, which is amazing. And then everything's recorded, so you can come back to it as many times as you want, as often as you like. So thank you for joining me. I hope that that was fun and insightful for you. And I'm going to pull some more testable wines and do some more videos. So have a great day, drink some great wine, and thank you for watching.